Tori, somewhere level manager, is typing a calendar invite. Important team married. No agenda, no team update. The meeting starts in 22 minutes. The people receiving it already know what it means. You don't need the agenda. You never do. There's a specific feeling that comes with that notification. Tay zips everything slight looks completely normal. Amping tabs and churn 500. The Slack messages keep coming in. And somewhere in the back of your head is already months of savings. On how many months of savings you have. Hey, severance packet in the inbox. Laptop access cut before the call even ends. The manager says this was a really hard decision twice. We really value everything you've contributed. Nobody disagrees out loud. The call ends. The Zoom window closes, and the person sitting there has to figure out what to do with the rest of a Tuesday that suddenly has nothing scheduled in it. The company's stock is up 2.3%. Here's the number that doesn't make the headline, 916. That's roughly how many jobs have been disappearing every single day in 2026. Not during a recession. Not during any event that registers as a financial ticker during a period when the S&P 500 has been sitting near record highs. Corporate earnings reports keep using words so strong during a period words like outperformed expectations. During a period when the CEOs doing the cutting are also the ones collecting the same quarter. Highest profit margin in 3 years and 500 positions gone. No apology, no crisis. That these two facts sitting next to each other, Jut Mutaji sit next to each other, might require some explanation. An investor deck, strategic realignment. There's a specific kind of disorientation that comes from watching two things be true at the same time that don't seem like they should both be true. Tainat's its end, and your job might not exist by Friday. Most people feel that tension. They feel it in the news, in conversations with coworkers, in the way certain meetings get scheduled with no warning and no context. But most people can't name the mechanism producing it. They know something shifted. They can't point to exactly you'll be able to name it. You'll understand profit the specific and mass logic into the same decision, unleashes layoffs made by the same person on the same afternoon. And once you see that logic clearly, once you understand how the pieces actually connect, it doesn't go away. It shows up everywhere, in every earnings call, restructuring announcement, in every subject line that reads, important team update, with no agenda attached. Look at what's been publicly documented. The scale of what's happening in 2026 deserves to be seen directly before anything false gets explained about it. According to SkillSanker's 2026 layoff tracker, 200 through late May, total workers affected, 130,603. That averages to approximately 916 people per day losing their jobs. Every day, Yatachi and 60 Kens, including the days when the farce priest runs shit about consumer confidence holding steady. The financial press runs stories is not an abstraction in a mid-sized American town. Gone. And then that same number again the next day. And the day after that, and every day since without a single week where the pace slowed enough to matter. Now the names. Because data without names is easy to cross from a distance and then set aside. Oracle. An estimated 20,000 to 30,000 people. The largest single company margin of not a startup. Not a regional chain that lost ground to a stronger competitor. One of the most established technology companies on the planet, a fixture of enterprise software for 4 decades, Fix Tumble, cutting up to 30,000 positions without any of the companies a company in distress. No turnaround plan. No acknowledgement of a strategic mistake. Just a reductions never reach. Meta, 8,000 people. May 2026. Say, a company that reported strong quarterly earnings the same period it was processing those terminations. A company whose founders spent the same month those 8,000 people were updating their LinkedIn profiles, giving interviews about the future of AI and the next phase of the companies. Those two companies alone account for tens of thousands of the 134,603. But they're not the story. They're just the names big enough to make the business press for a few days before the next announcement pushed them down the page. The real story to intelligence. The real story is what surrounds them. According to 21 companies had announced mass layoffs since Section 2026 as of late March, a figure that had grown Section over 2,000 by early May. Not 1,621 separate companies, each with their own press release, carefully worded to say as little as possible, each with their own severance packets calculated to the legal minimum in their jurisdiction, in fights sent to P. Each with their own choose no idea it was comings until the notification appeared on their screen. Then, there's one matters more than any of the others. And this one conducted by regionorg.org, a survey that 55% of U.S. employers tortured. Expected the employers surveyed, more than half of the employers surveyed. Not companies in crisis, not industries in freefall. A cross-section business saying, yes, we expect to cut more people before December. And of those employers planning additional cuts, 44% cite AI as a top driver, breaking a lot pressures as the most reasons, the most commonly named reasons in 2026 is not one thing, but AI's role is now structural in a way that previous automation waves were nefatured. There's an assumption most people carry about how layoffs work that most people never examine it directly. It goes like this. Companies cut jobs when they're in trouble. Revenue is falling, Jave story. The outlook is bad. The visible business is stress. Of that distress, a struggling company does what it has to do. That's the mental model. It made sense for most of the 20th century. It no longer describes what's actually happening in 2026. That assumption, reality. And the gap between people's confusion lives is where most people's. Here's what replaced it. A company with 10,000 employees in annual revenue is doing fine. Profitable, stable, growing at a pace that satisfies investors. But a new generation of AI-assisted workflows means that same $2 billion in revenue can now be produced with 8,500 employees instead of 10,000. Those fan position aren't filled by bad employees or performers. They're filled by competent people doing real work that genuinely needed doing 12 months ago. But the work can now be done differently. But the work can maximize return on capital. And from the perspective of anyone whose job is to maximum 100 positions aren't just redundant. They're a drag on margin. And margin is what moves the stock price. The company isn't in trouble, it's optimizing. The layoff isn't a rescue operation. It's a calculation that got run on a spreadsheet and came out the same way every time someone checked the math. A man I know spent 11 years in corporate finance at a mid-sized technology firm before his own position was eliminated last March. He's not bitter about it, or at least he works hard not to sound bitter, when he talks about it. He described the internal conversation plainly. He said the discussion at the executive level wasn't, do we need to cut costs to survive? The company was profitable. There was no survival question. The discussion was, now that we can reduce headcount without reducing output, what's the argument for not doing it? He said he sat in that room and tried to construct one. He looked at retention, at institutional knowledge, at the cost of rebuilding capabilities if the AS underperformed. He made the case as well as he could. He said nobody pushed back in a way that changed the outcome. The math was too clean. Here's the part that feels wrong even when you understand it intellectually. The workers being cut are often the same workers who built the systems that replace them. They documented the processes that got fed into the training data. They identified the edge cases that made the models more accurate. They spent months implementing the tools, debugging the outputs, catching the errors, making the technology reliable enough to trust. They made themselves redundant through competence. And then the calendar invite competence. This is the specific engine producing approximately 916 job losses per day in 2026. Margin expansion during economic growth. Margin expansion that opened this video. The contradiction that opened this video just are contradicting life. Operational efficiency, disciplined cost management. From the employee's laptop in the automated email that arrived while the Zoom call was still technically in progress. Access revoked. Revoked. Please, return your equipment. A prepaid shipping label is attached. The easy version of this story is a tech story, and it goes like this. During the pandemic hired, when every technology company in the country was convinced that the acceleration in digital adoption was permanent, and that they needed the staff for a future turned out not to arrive on schedule. The correctional, but logical. The people are mostly well-compensated engineers, 20s and early 30s, in their lateable and marketable skills who will find something else with Sturt Cullies within 6 months, and probably just end up fine. Uncomfortable in the short term. Not a structural crisis. Not a version over hire. The correction is genuinely happening. But the story has spread well past its origin point. And the version that's spreading doesn't get nearly the same coverage. Healthcare Administration has been quietly going through its own version of this reckoning for the past 8 token-assisted tools for claims processing, prior authorization, that even cost capability threshold, that even cost hospital systems are now acting on. Financial services, back office operations. The teams that handle document processing, JITs, compliance reporting, and customer account management have been shrinking in ways that don't generate press releases. Because no single cut is large enough to constitute news on its own. To retail management layers that existed to coordinate between systems that now talk to each other directly. Today's customer support functions that spent years training on call transcripts, those transcripts, and are now discovering something else instead. Marketing and for productive. That were told content roles would make them more productive enough to replace them entirely. When the tools were a woman I know, 51 years old at the same insurance company, 19 years, managed a claims processing team of 14 people, got her calendar invite in February. Her team wasn't struggling. The performance reviews were struggling. The software her team had spent the better part of 2 years helping to implement and refine had simply gotten good enough to handle most of what they did without. All 14 positions were eliminated the same week. She told me she wasn't angry. She was confused in a way that anger hadn't arrived yet to replace. We did everything right, she said. That sentence has stuck with me. We were good at it because it captures something the data can't. The workers being displaced in this wave aren't people who failed to adapt or resisted learning new tools or fell behind in ways they could have prevented. So a significant share of them are mid-career professionals and 50% in their 40s experienced and valuable right up until the quarter when meth changed. Reemployment is taking longer for this group than any displacement cycle, particularly for workers over 45. The phrase comparable employment is carrying a lot of weight in the research. Comparable in story on this, comparable in title, comparable in the level of skill required. The salary match is where the comparison breaks down quietly, and it usually breaks down in one direction. There's a geography problem running underneath all of this that almost never makes it into national coverage. A tech layoff in Seattle or San Francisco happens inside a labor market with real depth, multiple industries competing for similar skills, and enough economic density that displacement has pathways out. The same category of restructuring in a mid-sized city in Indiana or Tennessee or Mississippi, where a regional operations center to people or a back office hub represented one of the few employers in the county paying wages above the service sector median. Those workers, something 4 options. Those workers, something structurally different. Some businesses don't have 4 options within a 20-minute commute, have none that match what they were doing. Around 916 per day. Averages don't have zip codes. The people inside that number do. So how do we explain what's happening? 2 version stories happening. 2 versions of this story would dominate most public conversation about AI and jobs, and both of them are missing something that matters. AI arrived. Displacement followed. That's how technological progress has always worked. The loom replaced weavers. The tractor replaced farmhands. Lycée, ATMs were supposed to eliminate bank tellers and didn't. Frey offers more jobs, and the economy ultimately creates more jobs than it destroys, even when the transition is brutal for the specific people caught in it. The second is the corporate greed story. The technology is the justification. The real motive was always cost reduction. AI just gave the story to tell the press. Then we decided labor was too expensive. Both versions have something real in them. The technology transition is genuine. The incentive to reduce labor costs is genuine. But both versions avoid saying something directly that the structure of the situation makes unavoidable once you look at it plainly. The current governance structure of publicly traded in companies that creates a predictable, entirely legal American incentive to reduce headcount whenever automation makes it possible, not when the company needs to. But Fallon works. Quarterly earnings get evaluated on margin. Margin improves when revenue holds and labor costs fall. Time Richery. That is close to automatic for any executive team whose compensations ties to share price performance. The workers aren't being cut because the company's struggling. They're being cut because eliminating those positions makes the next earnings call look better than keeping them would. That's not a scandal in the legal sense. Nobody is breaking a rule. It's the system producing exactly the outcome it was designed to produce when the inputs changed. What shifted in 2026 isn't the incentive structure. That incentive has existed for as long as public companies have reported quarterly earnings. What shifted is that AI on that incentive at scale, across industries, and faster than any previous automation wave has moved. The productivity gains from this transition are real. And this point deserves to be made clearly because both the optimist and pessimist framings tend to treat it as contested when it isn't. Aren't fabricating the efficiency numbers. Output per remaining employee genuinely raises in documented cases. The tools work. The question the data keeps raising, and that has gone unanswered by policy, by industry groups, by the companies doing the cutting, and largely by the press covering it, is who captures the value of that productivity spur's increase. In previous automation waves, the answer to that question varied. Sometimes workers captured Cape story through higher prices. Some consignors captured it through lower prices. Sometimes concentrated among shareholders. The early evidence from this wave points toward the Tuesday put story, points toward one answer more consistently. Gabe the Tuesday morning calendar invite are not capturing it. But pull back and look at what approximately 960 shuns jobber year. Cross. Around 334,000 people, assuming the current rate holds, data and there is nothing it will slow before December. A city, roughly the size of Corpus Christi, Texas, or Lexington, TUC, employed in January. Not because in January, processing severance paperwork by the time the year ends, the economy failed them. Not because their industries collapsed. Because economy mistakes that could have been avoided. Because the economy almost ran through their positions. The 9:14 a.m. calendar invite. The Zoom call with no agenda and a start time that lands suspiciously close to the beginning of the business day. The HR email that opens with, "We want to be transparent with you about some changes." The manager who keeps saying, "This was a really hard decision," in a tone that suggests the decision actually made several weeks ago by people who have never met the person on the other end of the call, that something had gone wrong. It's inside a company, a bad quarter, a strategic miscalculation that forced a painful correction. It's, in 2026, their operational procedure, a scheduled deliverable in a workforce planning calendar, standard reduction presentation, that the standard language in a restructuring presentation, that the CEO be asked about on the next earnings call, because the analyst priced always the headcount reduction into their models before. The announcement went out. There's a painful outcome. When a system produces a painful over time, there's stop scale and repeatedly outcome efficiently. It stops feeling like a failure. Behind time friction. It stops generating. Examine the kind of friction that causes institutions to slow down. It starts feeling like how things work, like the background condition of an economy. Rather than choices being made by identifiable people in identifiable rooms, in 16 jobs per day, is how things work right now in 2026. And most of the people whose Tuesday morning is about to look like that calendar invite, who are currently sitting at their desks doing their jobs well. People who help build the systems that will replace them, who have 19 years at the same company and strong performance reviews. And strong performance rees and teams that hit every metric, those people haven't gotten the notification yet. Jasher. The company's reporting record profits this quarter while simultaneously processing hundreds of terminations. Are saying two things at the same time without appearing to notice the tension between them. Bushin is healthier, and we have decided your position's no longer part of that health. Becrease. Those two statements, Smiths, are now routine. They appear in the same press release, reported in the same paragraph. Nobody on the earnings call asks the follow-up question. The productivity gains are real. The question of who captures them has an answer. It's just not an answer anyone who made the decision is being asked to defend out loud. The question worth sitting with isn't whether any of this is legal. It clearly is. The question is that thanks for a while now. The question is whether legal and fine have been the same thing for a while. 6 is the year enough people start noticing the gap between them. Has your company done this? Same round of cuts. Same careful language, same round of cuts, same careful about strategic alignment, while the quarterly numbers held steady. Drop it in the comments. Not just to vent, though that's completely fine. Geistel. But because the national number is around 916 per day, and I want to know what that number looks like from where you're actually sitting.